been a long time coming, and now Chicago public school students are back in the classrooms full time. It was almost a year and a half ago that students attended in-person learning 5 days a week, and it looked much different then than it does today. Brandis has been covering the first day of school, and Brandis, a lot different this year than last year, obviously.
Yeah, that's right, Paris. A lot. This time last year, students were starting remote learning across the district. But today, principals, teachers, and staff welcome students back into the classroom for full-time in-person learning. And considering the number of changes that have been implemented since the last time all students were in classrooms full-time, it's obviously a day of nerves as well. District schools reopened to social distancing, mask wearing, air filters in every classroom, and of course, lots of hand sanitizer. Mayor Lightfoot visited some schools today, welcoming students and teachers, and says she's confident in the plan that schools have for keeping students safe.
We have a specific protocol that we really put in place last spring when we opened up the elementary schools and then carried that through the high schools. It continues this year. And I won't get into the specific details, but we start with the classroom, then if necessary the school, and then obviously the system. But these are all things that we worked out in the various agreements with the Chicago Teachers Union that were subsequently ratified by the House of Delegates. We'll continue to monitor, obviously, on a daily basis where we are in the pandemic.
And Brandis, we've been following this, over the last couple of weeks. The Teachers Union and CPS are at odds. Are they still negotiating these safety measures?
Yes, they are actually, even though schools have resumed. They are still working on a new Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU. And contrary to what we just heard from the mayor, CTU argues that the city is rolling back some of those layered safety mitigations that they agreed to last winter and spring when schools reopened in phases. So, for example, CTU says the previous MOU called for a minimum 6 feet of social distancing, but the new guidance only calls for 3 feet. Temperature checks were previously mandatory for anyone entering the building, now only for 6 students. And parents are asked to keep their kids home, of course, if they have symptoms. And while the district did surveillance testing for employees and students, the district is now offering tests if students or staff report symptoms and only requiring it for unvaccinated students in sports.
We hear the mayor talk about how safe school was in the winter and the spring of last school year when they returned, but we're also dealing with her negotiating team that doesn't acknowledge it because their proposals run counter to what she claims is a success story. So it's frustrating, a little cognitive dissonance there as well, but we're still there.
Now, while thousands of parents sent their kids back into the classroom today, with or without trepidation, there are some families who opted out of the district entirely. We spoke with one such family, a house of 3 CPS students, or former CPS students, because they elected to remove all 3 in favor of homeschooling. And the youngest of the 3 is not vaccinated, and he's immunocompromised. Mom, Cassandra Kachaha, said they couldn't just take the risk.
Principals, teachers are doing what they can, but we don't feel like it's safe. As Dr. Arwady said, there's going to be transmission in schools. And for high-risk families, that's an unacceptable proposition. So we are back in our bubble and doing what we can to make sure that our family does not catch COVID.
And Brandis, I know the school district lost about 14,000 students out of something like 350,000.
Yeah, 350,000 down to 340-something thousand last year.
So what's the status this year?
So it depends on how you look at it. Of course, last year during the pandemic, losing 14,000 students in the middle of a pandemic, that's a lot even then. Typically, the district loses 6,000 to 7,000 students per year, somewhere in there. Now, there are concerns, though, that this year could be worse. The district reports some 100,000 students are in a risk category, at risk of dropping out. Interim CEO JOSÉ TORRES explains how the district arrived at that figure based on attendance, grades, discipline, and truancy.
The way that we broke that 100,000 was really around 80% that were at lower risk, but they were still in that count, and about 18,000 that were in the highest risk. And so it really depends on which ones where those 25,000 students might be, and I don't think it would have reached up to 25,000, but it would be we're continuing to do the work.
And we should be clear, that number doesn't necessarily mean 100,000 students will drop out. But one local organization is sounding the alarm bell on the problem, noting that the district could lose a lot of money if enrollment falls substantially. There are long-term economic impacts as well. The head of Kids First Chicago, which works to empower parents, argues the best way to find out why young people are disengaged is to ask the students themselves.
I think our prioritization on students this past year has really been looking at, like, what are they missing? What are they losing from an academic standpoint, which is really important. But I worry that by prioritizing that first, we're missing something really apparent, which is how do we make school an engaging space for students, which I do think that if you don't ask them directly why they're disengaged, we're not going to get the right answer.
Now, the school district says over the summer it began work to re-engage those nearly 100% of those students and has had contact, in fact, with 75% of them. Paris, school year ahead.
100,000 students though, that's a lot. That's a huge
a lot
chunk.
of students, and no one's saying that's definitely going to happen, but even a fraction of that is a lot.
Yeah, at risk. All right, a lot for CPS to handle, a lot for parents to handle right now. All right, thank you very much.